Intro, the lie you were raised inside. School told you that if you study hard, memorize well, behave correctly, follow the rules, get the grades, and avoid mistakes, you would succeed. But here you are, older, smarter, more aware. And you're finally asking the question nobody wants to hear. Why did I spend years learning things that didn't help me survive, or make money, or understand the real world? The answer is simple. School teaches you everything except how to make money. Not because you're not capable, not because you're not intelligent, but because the system wasn't designed for your freedom. It was designed for your conformity. And Steve Jobs said it best. Don't let the noise of others drown out your own inner voice. But the noise of school drowned you for years. Today, we clear it. Part 1 school teaches you history, but never value. Let's begin with the most ironic truth of the entire education system. In school, you study history. You memorize ancient empires. You analyze the lives of kings and queens. You learn about wars, revolutions, invasions, treaties. You spend years repeating dates, battles, and timelines you'll forget the moment the test is over. But nobody ever teaches you value, not economic value, not market value, not the value you create, the value you receive, or the value you exchange, not the value that moves the world you actually live in. You can recite the lineage of monarchs who died centuries ago, but you don't know the fundamentals of income. You can explain the fall of Rome, but not the rise of a business. You can describe the Battle of 1812, but not how to negotiate your salary. You learned about the Middle Ages, but not the modern economy that shapes every decision, every price, every opportunity of your life. You studied the past, so you never question the present. Because here is the truth every adult eventually discovers. History doesn't pay your rent. Value does. History is useful. It helps you think, reflect, understand humanity. But value is essential. It determines how you survive and how you rise. Value is the foundation of money. Money follows value. Money chases value. Money flows toward whoever creates the most value, not the one who memorizes the most facts. But school never explained this. Not once. Not in a chapter. Not in a lecture. Not in a conversation. You were never taught how value is created, how value is measured, how value is exchanged, how value becomes income, how value becomes power, how value becomes freedom. Instead, you were told that money is complicated, mysterious, dangerous, taboo, something adults just figure out. No formulas, no frameworks, no real-world understanding. And because you were never taught value, you were left with the illusion that money is luck, that money is rare, that money is for certain people. But here is the truth. Money is not complicated. Value is. Money is simply the shadow of value. Wherever value appears, money follows. A person who understands value cannot be controlled because they can always create opportunities. They can always rebuild. They can always reinvent themselves. They don't depend on the system. They understand the system. And the system hates that. That's why school gives you stories of dead civilizations instead of tools for the world you're living in. That's why you spent years analyzing the causes of ancient collapses, but never learned the causes of your own financial struggles. They want you educated enough to follow instructions, but not empowered enough to question them. Smart enough to work, but not wise enough to build. History tells you what happened. Value tells you what matters. And no one in school ever taught you that. Part 2 school teaches you dates, but never decisions. You learned thousands of dates. You memorized endless timelines. You filled pages with summaries, paragraphs, and essays. You trained your mind to retrieve information, but never to choose anything. Because the one skill that runs the entire adult world, the skill every successful person depends on, was never taught to you. Decision-making. Money doesn't come from knowledge. It comes from decisions. Opportunities don't fall from the sky. They appear when you decide to move. Relationships, careers, stability, success, they are all the byproduct of decisions, not memorization. And yet, school spent years shaping your memory and 0 minutes shaping your judgment. You were never taught how to choose a path when two options look equally risky, how to weigh consequences before you act, how to manage uncertainty without freezing daughter, how to make decisions with incomplete information sets, how to trust your intuition instead of following the crowd by, how to think independently when everybody else is scared to are. That is the tragedy. The education system taught you to perform under controlled conditions. Clear questions, clear answers, clear rules. But the real world is controlled by ambiguity, by unknowns, by imperfect information, by choices that have no right or wrong, only consequences. In school, you were trained to avoid mistakes. In life, you must learn from them. But instead of learning how to choose, you were given multiple choice questions. A, B, C, D. 4 little boxes, one perfect answer, one correct choice. A world of certainty. They conditioned you to believe that every problem has one right answer. They conditioned you to wait for instructions. They conditioned you to think someone else knows better. And now, life gives you no letters. Life gives you no rubric. Life gives you no answer key. Life gives you no permission slip. Life says, decide. Decide even when you're unsure. Decide even when you're scared. Decide even when you might be wrong. Because in school, making a wrong decision meant failure. But in life, not making a decision guarantees it. Indecision is the most expensive habit of adulthood. It costs money, time, relationships, energy, opportunities. It paralyzes talented people. It kills potential quietly, slowly, painfully. And this is why so many students step into adulthood, feeling overwhelmed, directionless, lost. It's not because they're incompetent, it's because they were never prepared for the real game. School prepared you for tests, structured, predictable, safe. But life is not a test. Life is a series of decisions. No syllabus, no teacher, no correct answer. Just choices and what they create. If you want a different life, you don't need more knowledge. You need courage. You need clarity. You need autonomy. You need the ability to choose and to live with what you choose. That's the skill school never gave you, and the skill adulthood demands every single day. Part 3 School teaches you rules, but never creation. Have you ever stopped and wondered why school loves rules so much? Raise your hand. Sit still. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't question the lesson. Don't challenge the teacher. Follow instructions. Do exactly what I tell you. It was never truly about learning. It was about conditioning. Conditioning for compliance. Conditioning for obedience. Conditioning for a world where being predictable is rewarded and being original is punished. Because a predictable person is easy to manage, but a creative person, a thinker, a builder, someone who questions the rules, that person is dangerous. In school, you learned rules, but you never learned creation. You were never taught how to take an idea and bring it to life, how to see a problem and solve it with initiative, how to create something new without waiting for permission, how to innovate instead of imitate, how to challenge the status quo instead of repeating it, how to create opportunities instead of begging for them. Instead of building things, you memorized things. Instead of inventing solutions, you followed instructions. Instead of learning how to think, you learned how to repeat. You memorized formulas, but you never created systems. You filled notebooks, but you never filled a portfolio. You practiced obedience, but never experimented with originality. You were rewarded for fitting in, punished for standing out, celebrated for compliance, discouraged from curiosity. Every time you asked why, you were met with, because that's the rule. Rules became the cage. Your creativity became the prisoner. The irony? The world you're entering now doesn't reward rule followers. It rewards creators. The world pays the people who build new ideas, question how things are done, imagine better systems, dare to disrupt, solve problems no one else wants to touch, create value out of nothing. But school didn't prepare you for that. School prepared you to be managed, not to lead, to follow directions, not to design your own, to wait for permission, not to take initiative. Steve Jobs once said, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." But school spent years trying to remove that crazy from you. Every spark of imagination was labeled distraction. Every attempt to do something differently was labeled problematic. Every question that exposed a flaw in the system was silenced with discipline. They didn't want you to question the box. They wanted you to stay inside it. But here's the truth. Creation happens outside the box. Innovation happens outside the rules. Freedom happens outside permission. The world you live in today was built by people who refused to sit down, raise their hand, and wait for someone to call on them. Inventors, entrepreneurs, artists, thinkers, none of them were created by rules. They were created by rebellion, by curiosity, by frustration, by vision, by the audacity to say, "This can be better." You weren't born to follow instructions. You were born to create. School tried to make you manageable. Life needs you to be original, and that's the shift you must make now. Part 4 school teaches you theory, but never income. This is the biggest failure of the entire education system. You spent years studying things that were interesting, cultural, and sometimes intellectually stimulating. Photosynthesis, Shakespeare, the Pythagorean theorem, chemical reactions, philosophers from the 1800s, ancient civilizations and their empires. Fascinating? Yes. Useful in life? Occasionally. Life-changing? Rarely. Money-making? Almost never. And yet, this was the foundation of your education. School fed you theory, because theory is safe. It doesn't threaten the system. It doesn't give you leverage. It doesn't give you independence. But income is dangerous. Income makes you self-sufficient. Income gives you options. Income creates leverage. Income lets you walk away from anything toxic. A job, a boss, a system. Income gives you freedom. And the system is not built to produce free people. So, instead of teaching you the skills that generate income, they gave you subjects that keep you intellectual, but financially helpless. You were never taught how money actually works in the real world, how to manage money emotionally and practically, how to grow it slowly and safely, how to multiply it with skill, not luck, how to negotiate your worth, how to market a skill people will pay for, how to make your first $100 independently, how to turn a talent into an income stream style, how to build a service from zero gessered, how to find your first real client, how to charge a fair price without guilt, how to handle taxes, credit, budgeting, debt, investments, how to use money as a tool, not a burden. You studied facts, but not financial survival. You learned concepts, but not cash flow. You memorized theories, but not strategies. You can analyze a poem, but not a contract. You can write a thesis, but not a proposal. You can answer exam questions, but not the questions life throws at you. And this is not an accident. School trained you to earn a paycheck, not to create revenue. A paycheck makes you dependent. Revenue makes you free. A paycheck keeps you predictable. Revenue makes you powerful. A paycheck locks you into a system. Revenue lets you build your own. That's why the curriculum never included how to identify opportunity, how to sell ethically, how to build a network, how to create value from nothing, how to think like an entrepreneur, how to manage your time and energy, how to raise your income without raising your hours. These skills threaten the structure because someone who understands income stops needing permission, stops needing approval, stops needing the system. They can leave the job, Start something new. Build a path that doesn't exist yet. And here's the painful reality. This is why millions of students graduate with diplomas, but no economic survival skills. Diplomas without direction, degrees without income, years of study without practical power. They enter adulthood knowing how to analyze ancient texts, but not how to pay rent. They know how to solve equations, but not how to solve financial problems. They can describe the Renaissance, but not how to build a life. And then they wonder why they feel lost, why money feels terrifying, why the world feels confusing, why adulthood hits like a storm. It's simple. School prepared you to answer questions. Life requires you to generate value, and value, not theory, is what creates income. Until you learn that, you will forever feel behind in a world that rewards creation, not memorization. Part 5. The System Revealed. Why School Hides Money. Let's be brutally clear. The system isn't broken. The system isn't failing. The system isn't outdated. The system works exactly the way it was designed to work. People like to say, school needs reform. But that's not the truth. School doesn't need reform. It needs exposure. Because the purpose of school was never to create innovators, thinkers, builders, creators, or leaders. It was designed to create workers. And not just any workers, but predictable, compliant, easily managed workers. People who follow orders, people who need supervision, people who fear mistakes, people who wait for permission, people who believe someone else knows better, people who prefer instructions over initiative, people who feel not ready yet unless a system validates them. School was built during the industrial age for factories, assembly lines, production halls, a world where the highest virtue was obedience and the worst sin was questioning authority. Think about it. The bell rings. You move. The bell rings again. You stop. Rows of desks. Standardized tests. Uniform answers. A teacher at the front telling you what's correct. It's not education. It's conditioning. Conditioning for predictability. Conditioning for hierarchy. Conditioning for dependency. None of this was accidental, because the system never needed you to think. It needed you to comply. And this is exactly why money was never taught. Money creates freedom. Freedom creates independence. Independence creates power. Power threatens the system. So they kept you financially blind. They kept you dependent, uncertain, confused. Because confused people don't rebel. Confused people don't take risks. Confused people don't build empires. Confused people follow instructions. But here comes the twist. The world you live in today, the modern world, rewards the exact opposite of what school trained into you. Today, the world rewards initiative. You move before you're told. Creativity, you build what didn't exist before. Clarity, you simplify what's complex house. Courage, you take risks others avoid. Focus, you protect your attention. Discipline, you build structure from chaos. Value creation, you solve real problems. Speed, you adapt faster than the system. Independence, you think for yourself. The world pays the people school tried to suppress. The world rewards the traits school tried to remove from you. The world crowns the misfits, the rebels, the questioners, the independent thinkers, the ones who refuse to wait for permission. The people school called difficult are the ones the world now calls successful. So if you feel behind, if you feel lost, if you feel like you missed something, here is the truth. You didn't fail. School failed you. It didn't prepare you for the world you entered. It prepared you for a world that no longer exists. You weren't taught to think. You weren't taught to create. You weren't taught to build. You weren't taught to manage money, or to make decisions, or to take initiative. You were taught to obey. But obedience has no value in the modern economy. The future belongs to people who break patterns, not follow them. People who build, not wait. People who question, not memorize. People who choose courage over compliance. And that is the shift you must now make. Not because you're broken, but because the system never gave you the tools you deserved. Part 6. The shift. Think for yourself. Here is where everything changes. Not just your mindset, not just your habits, your entire relationship with the world. Steve Jobs didn't become Steve Jobs because he was the smartest kid in class, because he had the best grades, because he followed the rules perfectly. He became Steve Jobs because he unlearned everything school tried to put inside him. He understood something most people never realize. You cannot build an extraordinary life using ordinary rules. So he stopped waiting for permission, stopped following the script, stopped letting systems define who he was allowed to be. He said the 5 words that changed everything. Think for yourself, not repeat what you're told, not follow the curriculum, not fit in, not do what everyone else does. School taught conformity. Life requires originality. School taught memorization. Life requires imagination. School taught obedience. Life rewards courage. Think for yourself is not a cute slogan. It's a declaration of independence, a refusal to live on autopilot, a decision to stop outsourcing your mind to the system. Thinking for yourself means questioning what others accept as truth, challenging ideas that don't make sense, observing the world instead of blindly participating in it, seeing opportunities where others see limitations, asking, why not, when everyone else asks, why? Choosing your own direction instead of waiting for instructions. Most people never do this. They repeat, they imitate, they follow paths someone else created for them. But real value is never created that way. Real value comes from people who think, build, create, innovate, experiment, test, learn, break things, fix things, try again, and again, and again. Jobs lived inside this cycle. He didn't fear mistakes, he mined them for insight. He didn't fear rejection, he expected it. He didn't fear failure, he used it as fuel. He learned to trust his own judgment, more than he trusted the expectations of the world. He didn't wait to be chosen. He chose himself. And that's the shift you must make now. Because value is not created by people who follow instructions. Value is created by people who write their own instructions. People who stop asking, is this allowed? And start asking, is this meaningful? People who stop waiting for the world to open a door and start building their own door. When you begin thinking for yourself, something powerful happens. Your decisions become yours. Your progress becomes yours. Your mistakes become your teachers. Your risks become your leverage. Your ideas become your currency. This is how innovators rise. This is how creators build empires. This is how entrepreneurs change industries. This is how leaders reshape the world. And here's the truth. Wherever true value is created, money follows. Not immediately, not magically, but inevitably. When you start thinking for yourself, you stop being controlled. You stop being replaceable. You stop being one of many. You become one of one, a category of your own, a voice of your own, a thinker among imitators. And that shift, from following to thinking, is the beginning of real freedom. Part 7. The new lesson school never gave you. So here's the lesson. School never dared to teach you. Money is not made by memorizing. Money is made by creating. Your income is not tied to your grades, your degree, your age, your background. It's tied to your value, your clarity, your initiative, your discipline, your ability to learn fast. School prepared you for a world that no longer exists. Now you must prepare yourself for the world you actually live in. And for that world, the real rule is simple. Stop waiting to be taught. Start teaching yourself.